Food for thought. We're back. Week 3. A lot of action yesterday. Chief got a grin on his face that I haven't seen in quite some time. There are 2 Monday night football games this evening, so maybe we'll dive into some of that a little bit later. But gotta love this league. Drama, something new every week. Questions are being answered as we move forward here in September. Chief Justice 06. Before I get through these reads, what's going on, bro?
Nothing much. Doing good. Glad to come on. It's a great day to be alive. It's a great day to be on Food for Thought as we talk about some of last week's happenings. Look forward to what's coming up for DFS this week. And I am extremely excited to talk about this past week like I never have been on this show.
Yeah, if you're tuning in for the first time, hit that like button for us. It's Monday. If you're just discovering us, if you don't know what we're about, kind of hitting the reset button on this show.
Luch, you muted, brother. We're getting up to a rough start here. Crash and burn.
It's rough. I was actually saying some pretty good things, but that's what we're about, man. It's everybody makes mistakes. Like my single entry team yesterday was a big mistake. But if you're just discovering us for the first time, it's Monday. We hit the reset button. It's hard to get data on yesterday's, every game. There are some stuff, fantasy data. Fantasy points data has some stuff updated, and actually made some notes about a couple games I want to talk about that I thought were really interesting. Questions are starting to be answered, and I'm going to throw it over to you because some of those answers are with your Carolina Panthers. So just give me a 1 to 10. How happy are you, Chief?
A 10. Here's what I wanted to see yesterday from the Carolina Panthers as I continue to wear my gear on this show. Here's what I wanted to see. Were we going to be able to have competent offensive play? Now, I've talked at nauseum about this, Luch. If you have competent quarterback play, you're able to compete, right? And then it's up to what happens in the game that allows you to win the game. Some teams are good at winning. Some teams are not, i.e. the San Francisco 49ers. We'll come back to that later. But for all intents and purposes, right? What have we been saying? Luch, I've been saying this since last season. This isn't new. Andy Dalton should have been the starter from the jump. If a quarterback isn't ready, they're just not ready. It doesn't matter how high you drafted them. It doesn't matter how highly you value them. There's value in letting the young quarterback sit behind an experienced veteran and learning the game from the sidelines. And I think what you saw yesterday, Luch, was a quarterback that was a quarterback that's been in the league a long time and is able to go out and execute a game plan. I've said this, like, why does Joe Flacco keep a job? And I'm bringing up Joe Flacco from last season. Joe Flacco's seen it all. No, he's not the most athletic. No, he's not going to be out there scrambling for first downs. Yes, he's old. If I'm not mistaken, I think Andy Dalton is 36. I think Dalton's 36. But here's what they have done, Luch. They've played a lot of quarterback in the NFL. They've played a lot of football, and they've seen the coverages. They've seen the disguises, and they can handle the pressure, right? The disguises aren't gonna rattle them as much. They know how to call the protections. They know how to put their teams in a position to be successful. And so, as I said last week, with Andy Dalton at the helm, I felt comfortable that we were going to be able to move the ball down the field. I still didn't think we were going to win because I thought our defense needed some help. Well, lo and behold, Luch, guess what happens when your offense can come out and push the ball down the field and score some points? The defense isn't on the field as much when you can move the football, and they get what we call in the sports world the juice, right? They get the juice. They get excited. They get a little bit of adrenaline pumping, and you get out to an early lead, and all of a sudden, the team keeps pounding. They have a little bit of relief. So for all you Panthers fans out there, no, we're not going to a Super Bowl. I don't know if we're going to make the playoffs, but doesn't it feel good to just get up off the mat and show that we can put together some quality football? I'm glad we started there. We'll see what we do next week, Luch. But for all intents and purposes, this was a good week for the Carolina Panthers. And I'm saying next week, we've actually got a bye next week. So this is even better for the Panthers to keep getting acclimated to the Andy Dalton era for this season. Couldn't be happier as a Carolina fan. And for those of you with Deontay Johnson in your best ball shares, get excited. It looks like those might not be dead just yet. Luch, I want to plug this in there. A little bit of statistics early, which isn't really our MO, but I looked this thing up. Do you know how many targets Deontay Johnson had yesterday? And I'm not
11
saying
or 10 or 11.
14. Let's go 14. Luch, 14 targets for Deontay Johnson. I don't think he's going to get 14 every week, but that's bona fide number one option targets. We've seen what Andy Dalton could do with A.J. Brown back in the old Cincinnati days. I'm very excited about what Deontay Johnson might be able to do from a fantasy perspective as we progress through the season, if he's going to get that kind of volume behind Andy Dalton. All right, I'm done with the Panthers. Closing that off.
Not even that. We saw what he did with 7 or 8 weeks of Adam Thielen last year. I mean, if he finds his guy that can get open, he will keep going to him.
Yeah.
And cool story for him. I did read yesterday, it was a Jay Glazer that reported that the Panthers turned down trade offers from 4 different teams already for Bryce Young. Pretty sure that was a Jay Glazer report, which is kind of interesting. I'm sure we will circle back on the Bryce Young thing many weeks from now, and we'll see what develops. Yeah. But congrats on the big win. Good for you being able to watch some competent football. Me as a Titans fan, not so much. And hey, there's always next year. I'll be watching a lot of college football and scouting those.
Go get Joe Flacco. Your season will turn around immediately.
I don't need the season to turn around. There's nothing to win.
I'm kidding.
There's nothing to win.
I'm kidding.
There's nothing to win. I actually had a tweet that went like Titans social viral about Will Levis yesterday. Almost have like 300 likes on it. I don't even know if I know 300 people. That was kind of cool. But we'll get into Titans Packers and the Malik Willis revenge game. But I want to get a couple of these out of the way first. So
can I bring something up, Luch? Since we're I want to talk about this today specifically in our recap section, because our opening section, because I do think this is interesting. It's way too early, right? But I think this is interesting. Luch, do you know how many undefeated teams there are in the National Football League right now, right off the top of your head? Just don't look it up, please, and I don't think you will. But do you know how many teams are undefeated?
Man, I have so many things on my brain right now. Who's undefeated? 2.
There's 5, actually. There's 5. And but that's okay, because this is going to lead into, I think, some things we'll talk about this week. Now, one of the teams hasn't played yet, which is Buffalo. So I'm going to exclude them because they're playing. We're recording on Monday, and they're playing on Monday night. So
now I'm on topic. Pittsburgh and Justin Fields, 3-0, organization change. Who's the other one? What other quarterback had the big organization change? They're also undefeated.
Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes, who is younger than Joe Burrow, by the way. And
interesting, right?
And the Vikings are a huge talking point I want to get to a little bit later for sure. So
there's another, there's one that's really obvious. Even though they don't look like they should be, it's the obvious. It's Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs.
Kansas City.
Right. They're 3-0. And then there's one other out in the NFC, Luch, that it's early, but I don't think anybody expected this. And I think under the radar, we talked about this, I think, in our opening show. Under the radar, sneaky coaching change, and this team has gotten behind this coach and their quarterback. And that's Geno Smith in the Seattle Seahawks.
Mike McDonald. Yep.
Yes. So, Luch, I wanted to bring that up because I think when you look at these teams, right, out of those teams, Seahawks made a splashy hire, right, the right time, I think. at the right time. Steelers made a quarterback change at the right time, right? Right time. Chiefs, obvious. And then we've got Minnesota, who was bringing in a rookie. He gets hurt. But what have we talked about, Luch? Kevin McConnell can get it done with any quarterback, right? Why am I bringing this up? Why am I bringing this up? And I promise we'll get you there. Competent coaching. And I know I use the word competent because I feel like there are a lot of coaches that just don't get it in the NFL and they hold their teams back from success. For all the talks that Justin Fields, it was going to be a week-to-week basis. This team is 3-0. I don't see any way that that Coach Tomlin can go to Russell Wilson at this time. They're not paying Russell Wilson a bunch of money. This guy seems to be the future. Can he continue to get it done? They got a game with Indianapolis this week. Could very well be 4-0. We'll find out. Kansas City Chiefs have kind of seen a change of the guard in their wide receiver room or in their receiving core. Travis Kelce not getting the first look. Rashee Rice getting most of the volume. I think that's important here. We go to Buffalo. What if they had, Luke, a massive, or what we thought was a mass exodus out of their wide receiver room with Stephon Diggs, but they've had an offensive culture shift where they're not throwing the ball 40 times a game anymore, right? They're leaning on the run. Josh Allen makes 1 or 2 special plays a game, and they want to win. And I know we said we'd exclude them, but why am I bringing this up, Luke? There's one reason I'm bringing this up. If you're not able to evolve your team as the times change, for whatever reason, right? For whatever reason, you're going to get left behind. And Luch, I feel like we're looking at a change of the guard here in the NFL, and it's just 3 weeks, but it's materializing right before our eyes. And if these teams want to keep up, they've got to keep up. There's got to be a changing of the guard. You've got to keep up with the times, right? Keep the pulse on your football team. And I think those teams, those few teams that are undefeated that have had some changes are doing that. All right, Luch, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, and I have some Vikings talk to get into, but I got to get these reads out of the way real quick. So Splash Sports, never heard of it. They're pretty new, and they're available in 34 states. If you're into survivor pools and pick'ems and some other things like that, definitely get on over there and check out Splash Sports. The 10K RotoGrinders Survival Revival, as well as contests for Fantasy Tiers and Pick'em. Check it out, splashsports.com/RotoGrinders to compete against the RG Experts community. How about this one? Taylor Swift Tix Picks. Are you or someone you know dying to go to the Taylor Swift Eras Tour? Play our free game every week for a chance to win 2 tickets and a trip to Vancouver. Check out the link in the description to play and watch the short video at the end of our show for more information. Not a huge Swiftie, but Vancouver is a city I always wanted to travel to. So check out the video at the end of the show if you or somebody knows into Taylor Swift and looking to win a trip to Vancouver. Lastly, shout out to our RG Listener League winner, JMoDab2232, for taking it down yesterday. Don't forget to join us each week in the RG Listener League. Play alongside of other viewers and your favorite host. You have a chance every week to compete for first place and win yourself a month of RotoGrinders Combo Premium. Check out the description for an invite to the contest when it goes live. And I almost did the unthinkable. I came in second last week. My single entry squad was a disaster. And that was partially due to the dud, other than Marvin Harrison, in the exposure I had in the Detroit-Arizona game. Rashid Shaheed getting goose-egged against the Eagles, and I can't wait to talk about that. And we had a comment in our chat about Mr. A-Chain, who was chalky and did absolutely nothing. Yet he covered his receiving yards prop, so we might be in for tough times with Skylar Thompson at the helm, despite, whatever you think of Mike McDaniel as a play caller. And, we like most people, give Tua a tough time on this show because Miami, couple straight wild card exits. They beat up on bad teams, struggle against good, tough, defenses. Buffalo's had their number, like we've talked about for years. So I don't know what's up with Miami. Kind of feel for the best ball owners who have invested in Tyreek, Waddle, You figure A-Chain has it still has the one to provide you with the most ceiling from week to week, but we will get to Miami without going totally off the grid. Let's go with who cooked over the weekend, and we'll trickle into our review. And are you on mute right now?
I'm not on mute anymore.
Okay. Who was cooking last week? And it wasn't Miami.
Yes, it wasn't Miami. Luch, I'm going to bring this up and then I'll get into our illustrious producer, Steve. Thank you. See, that's freaking amazing. That's going to be our GIF for this segment. Who's cooking? Luch, what if I told you, and I'm going to get into the team, a team here. What if I told you there are more undefeated teams than teams that haven't won a football game?
I could tell you one team who hasn't won a football game.
Well, I know it's the Titans. One's the Jaguars. The other is the Bengals. The Bengals play tonight. So we're good there. Here's who was cooking last week. Shout out to, it's going to be a rookie Bo Nix. Now, I'm not saying the Broncos are about to rattle off 30 million wins here. That's not what I'm saying. But I think we saw a little bit of that college experience, Luch, right? Like when we looked at Bo Nix, what have we talked about with Bo Nix? Well, it's the fact that he's played a lot of college games, and I think Sean Payton went with him because even though he was let's call it an old NFL rookie or older NFL rookie, at some point all of that college experience was going to come into play. Now we're 3 games in, Luch. But I think, we saw a bright spot yesterday with him. Obviously, Bo Nix was a guy that could have just helped you take down a tournament. It was like that, he was cheap. And so with that being said, I wanted to give him a shout out as a rookie. In terms of the rookie quarterbacks, outside of Daniels, who, has flashed some rushing upside, Bo Nix, he's thrown the ball at least 35 times in each game. Now, I don't think that's sustainable. At some point, like, they've got to get the run game going, so forth and so on. But 216 yesterday, which isn't like crazy passing, but he had 9 rushing attempts for 47 yards and a touchdown. Like that's finding ways to keep your team alive and win football games, Luch. So Bo Nix, comes out yesterday and wins a big game on the road in Tampa Bay when I thought Tampa Bay was possibly going to be undefeated coming out of this week. Shout out to Bo Nix, right, for pulling out a rabbit out of the hat here and getting his team in the W column.
Yeah, and I still feel like nobody's going to want to click the Bo Nix button, and we'll talk about DFS pricing toward the end of the show, but just brutal game for Tampa Bay, and they were certainly not cooking. I will say a couple people were cooking in the San Francisco-LA game. One was Kyren Williams, and maybe some people avoided him per matchup, but the people that liked him for volume purposes were rewarded. 24 carries, just 89 yards, but he dumped it in twice on the ground and once more in the air. So he was and still is the de facto red zone guy. Cooper Kupp not around, Puka Nacua not around. Nice little game by Tutu Atwell, but volume, Kyren Williams, who the Rams pull off the stunner in San Fran, who's also missing bodies for sure, but to no mistake, the 49ers were still heavily favored. Shout out to Brock Purdy for, of course, didn't get the win, and you'll have the haters saying, well, did he win the game? He almost threw for 300 yards and 3 tutties. I know the LA defense is super banged up, but listen, Juwan Jennings just broke fantasy, and I had some
Juwan
Jennings.
Rice?
What?
You mean Juwan Rice?
Juwan Rice, JJ Stokes, if you will, whoever you want to call him. Listen, 3 touchdowns, 41 DK points, just absolutely ridiculous.
44 on FanDuel, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
I could be wrong, but either way.
Well, anyway, so Brandon Ayuk, disappointing stat line, was the chalky receiver play.
Listen, but he got the volume. That's the thing. He got the volume. He didn't convert the volume. And that was one of the first things I looked at this week. I said, well, God, it seems like him and Jennings were getting the same volume. I think their target share was identical or something close. Let me look that up.
I have it right here. He had one less target than Jennings. He had 10 targets. Now, only 70%, meaning 7 of those passes, were deemed catchable targets, according to fantasy points data. And 70% is actually kind of a low-end number for catchable targets in the grand scheme of things. So, still, 7 catchable targets for Ayuk. You'd hope for a little bit better of a line. But listen, Jennings got the touchdown equity, ripped off the big plays. And I had some Jennings in my multi-enter builds. I had some Purdy, just not nearly enough and not with the right pieces. I didn't have nearly as much Saquon Barkley as I guess I should have had in hindsight, which we'll get to. But yeah, talk to me about this 49ers LA game.
And I'm gonna come. I will. I'm gonna say those that played Barkley over Kamara yesterday were rewarded handsomely in that particular game. All right, yeah. Let's talk about San Francisco and let's talk about the Rams. And here's the thing: if Debo and Kittle sit out again, I think we've got the blueprint for this team. And clearly, guess what happens this week, Luke? You're still going to get the same target share, and eventually that's going to materialize in the big fantasy production. So I think in terms of that game, what we thought was going to happen did happen. It's just that Jennings had the monster game, and Ayuk had the meager game, or not nearly as much as we want. Like if Ayuk gets 18 fantasy points in that game, like you're probably feeling fine. It's just the fact he just barely got there, like he just didn't get you what you wanted. I think the biggest thing in that game, Luch, is we can't dispute that Shanahan's a good coach, but we also can't dispute that some of his decision making in critical situations is constantly on display at the wrong time. Here's what actually happened in that game, and I think people, maybe some people agree, maybe some people don't. That's why sometimes this is our opinion, not the actual statistics, and this is my opinion. I felt like both of these teams, given everything we've seen, were pretty equal yesterday. Here's why I say that. Both teams still have their starting quarterback, and both teams still had a weapon that was a true starter or an alternate starter. Here's what I mean. San Francisco had Purdy. I'm not going to include Jordan Mason because he's not their regular starter. Christian McCaffrey is their starting running back. But Brandon Ayuk is their starting big play wide receiver. And Jawan Jennings is their third guy. He's their third receiver. But he's on the field plenty, right? Okay. Let's go to the Rams. The Rams have Matthew Stafford. They lost 2 of their big receivers, but their starting running back, Kyron Williams, was in the game. He was suiting up. And then who was their alternate? That's your DeMarcus Robinson. Or your and Kobe Parkinson was there too as their starter, but he's not like a big play guy. But my point is, in terms of actual weapons available, both teams had their starting quarterback, one of their primary weapons, and a secondary weapon. And don't you know, Shanahan screws this up at the end of the game. Now watch this. Kudos to the Rams. Had to recover the onside kick. They had to do everything they had to do to win this game, Luke. But how often are we going to keep saying this about San Francisco not being able to close the deal? Yes, this is the week 3 football game. Guess what? This football team is also 1-2 now. Do you want to know what the Rams record is, Luke, by chance? Just for kicks. Do you want to know? It's 1-2. What if the Rams and San Francisco are coming down to the wire at the end of the season? Who do you think's going to get in? It's the freaking Rams, because right now they have the tiebreaker. I know they're going to play again. Luch, you get my point, right? Like, as much as we say, oh, it's early, a division game's going to matter. And they had this game won yesterday, and it suddenly slipped away. Looked just like the Falcons-Patriots, look just like all the Super Bowls that they've lost in San Francisco. And I'm exaggerating about the Super Bowls because clearly, they had to play the Chiefs last year. But my point is, they've got to fix this. Shanahan's great, but his late game management has got to improve if this team is going to get over the hump. I'm done.
Early is such a loose term, especially in the NFL. There's only 18 regular season weeks now, which I'm still not used to. But before you know it, you walk outside and you look at your neighbors' porches. Here come the pumpkins. Here come the Halloween decorations. Everyone talks about Thanksgiving plans. Listen, man, we're about to be 4 weeks into the regular season. So early in the NFL, I think you can start worrying a little bit right when that calendar starts to flip to October and you see the black and orange decorations throughout your neighborhood, because there are some things to be concerned about for sure. But just in terms of a couple other guys that were cooking, I have some air yard and target shares up here. Feel free to chime in on any of these guys who had a big share of their team's game plan yesterday. Some of them had big stat lines. Some of them didn't. Cleveland against the Giants. Malik Neighbors. Brian Dable said he wanted to get this guy the football. He had massive volume against Washington last week in a matchup that's mouthwatering. If you're playing DFS tonight, you know those Bengals receivers are going to be popping off the page. But he had Cleveland, who was proven to be a little bit tougher of a task on the back end. Malik Neighbors balled out. 62% of the team's air yards yesterday, 34% target market share. Talk to me. This rookie receiving class has been unbelievable so far. Malik Neighbors, Chief, kid's a baller.
Well, not only is he a baller, Luch, he's practically their only weapon when you send Saquon Barkley out of the door, packing. So they've got to get somebody the ball, and it just so happens to be him, right? Now, here's what we can't overlook. Doesn't matter how you slice it. This guy's a rookie, and they're intending on purpose. They're purposefully giving him this much volume. Now, what happens when these teams try to take that away? We'll figure that out as the season goes along, Luch. At some point, some of these teams are going to say, okay, let's just stop Malik Neighbors and see how this team can fare, right? At some point, that's coming this season. But for all intents and purposes, I mean, this is 2 weeks in a row now, and it looks like, they don't intend to slow down. I look at Malik Neighbors yesterday. And you look at, the number of targets that he picked up, Luch. Malik Neighbors had, hear me out, 7 targets week 1, 18 week 2, 12 in week 3. Those are bona fide again. Those are bona fide number 1 receiver opportunities. That's what we're looking for, right? When we're playing NFL DFS, looking for guys that are getting increased opportunities. And the more opportunities they have, the better we're going to be long term. So I think Neighbors is the real deal. And of course, the cost of admission is going to keep going up. And you got to get on board while you can, because once again, Luch, like I said, we've probably got, and I know you don't look at the pricing. They play Thursday night, so it won't really matter. If he has a big game Thursday night, come the next week, he's probably close to 8K on DraftKings. And now, right, and now you've got real decisions to make. Whereas we've kind of gotten away with some bargains earlier this season, Luch, in the 6K range at receiver. Like, if you've camped out in the 6K range at receiver the past few weeks, like, you've been very successful by nailing the right guys.
So hopefully Devontae Smith is okay. I haven't really heard an update on him. On a hit that, depending on who you ask, could have been a penalty, probably. Eagles play Tampa Bay next weekend, and hoping for the best for Devontae. Don't know the extent of that, but a team that probably needs a bye more than anybody has an early bye. I know I just said the word early, which we loosely throw around, but they play Tampa next weekend and they have a bye. So can they get Devontae and AJ right? Would be massive for them moving forward. But he had 55% of the team's air yard share in that game yesterday. So although maybe the day ended a little short for sure, but he was a massive part of the Eagles game plan for sure.
and the chat. You guys get involved too. Tell us your thoughts. I've got some thoughts about it. I am going to ask Luch. I'm going to give my thoughts. Give us your thoughts as well. If AJ Brown is close next week, do you think they play him or sit him? You get what I'm saying? When they know the bye week is coming, do you think they say, AJ, hey, how close are you? Feeling better but not 100? Why don't you sit this one out, buddy? And let's take this extra week, try to get you all the way back, and let's see if we can get 100% AJ Brown versus a 78% AJ Brown. What do you think? How do you think they handle AJ? And I do think this is fluid. If Devontae's out and AJ's close, I think AJ shoots up. If if Smith is fine and AJ's close, I think possibly they try to encourage him to sit out and let's roll into the bye week and see if we can get you all the way healthy.
Yeah, let's see what the Commanders do. If they lose to the Bengals, then everyone else in divisions 1 and 2, maybe you can afford to go into Tampa and try to hammer a heavy dose of Barkley and Dallas Goedert, which we'll talk about that game. But speaking of who was cooking, I mean, Dallas Goedert also broke the slate. I didn't have Goddard and Jennings together in any lineup, and that killed me in large field stuff.
Yeah, had a really big play in that game, which, I mean, that's what you're looking for, right, Luch? Like, a guy gets a big 60, 70-yard play, and that could turn the slate on its head.
I mean, 3 Saints collided with each other. It was whether it was a natural or an unnatural pick play. I don't remember the exact play. Just I've seen the GIFs, and I was kind of watching it live. I'm like, why is nobody around him? And 3 Saints went boom, game over.
And no one said any illegal. There were no illegal routes, Luch. It was simply like an underneath crossing route, and literally, like the Saints, they just ran into each other, and lo and behold, he's wide open on the left hash and running up the field. And I said, "Oh my gosh!" Like they just literally obliterated each other, and he took off. And I mean, that's part of the game. That's football, you know. And shout out to Kellen Moore for calling the right play in that situation, right? Like, got to give him kudos.
A couple more guys I'll rattle off. Then we'll talk about some big games and some takeaways just for time purposes. But good to see Amari Cooper ball out 52% of the air yards against the Giants, 32% target share. Drake London, 51% of the air yards, and scored a touchdown, 31% target market share. Panic button on Atlanta with Drake London and the best ball shares in week 1. Some people were screaming from the roofs and making victory laps, and that didn't last very long. You have nothing to worry about with Drake London. Now, Kyle Pitts, I can't really help you with, on the other hand. I know he got tackled inside the 5, but I still don't know about Kyle Pitts. Keep doing the same thing over and over every year, Chief. I don't know.
Kyle Pitts, if Kyle Pitts is going to get unleashed, he probably needs to be on a new team. I'm not sure why they don't try to get him in London like the bulk of the work, but secretly, Kirk Cousins is doing what Kirk Cousins does. Like, here's the thing, though, Luch. I feel like he wasn't quite healthy or maybe as confident week 1. And then you saw week 2, he moved a little bit more. And then I saw a play yesterday, and this is when I knew, Luch. I said, okay, even though they lost the game, Kirk Cousins is getting a little bit closer and closer and closer each week. If he can quit getting hit. Now, he's taking some shots back there, but here's what I saw, Luch, and they talked about it was kind of a botched snap under center, and they were running a stretch play for Bijan Robinson. And listen, and if you watch the play, you'll see it. Kirk Cousins had to turn on the QB jets to get that handoff done. I mean, he really had to get out there. And when you saw something like that, you said, okay, the movement is definitely better in week 3 than it was in week 1, right? If we see that, Luch, this offense is starting to take off here, right? And if they can keep it rolling, I think we'll see some good things from them for fantasy purposes. What I didn't anticipate was Ray McCloud being so involved in this offense. Now, last night, I don't think it was anything crazy. Let me go back to my Atlanta stuff here. Ray McCloud only had 3 targets in last night's game. London had 9, Mooney had 7. I'm sorry, London had 9, Mooney had 8. Kyle Pitts had 5. I'd be perfectly fine with Kyle Pitts settling into 5 to 7 targets a game. I think that I'd be perfectly fine. Let's just keep it consistent. Interestingly enough, Bijan only had 2 targets last night, but we'll see how things play out. But I think as Kirk Cousins gets more healthy, this offense will start to look a little bit better.
I'm with you. And one more note here. Keenan Allen was out. Rome Odunze, 48% of the team's air yard market share. If Keenan Allen lingers, if he's out again, or it's just a thing where he misses multiple games this year, Rome Odunze could be a league winner. And we'll have to. I'm curious to see. I don't even know who the Bears have on the schedule this week. But
Cole Kmet had a ton of targets yesterday too.
Yeah, there we go.
The thing, right? Like it's. Yeah. So here's what's interesting, because Luch, that's what. So I'll give everybody a little bit of insight to like how I prepare for this show. And me and Luch look at different things. So, but we work together. But it all works together. Like one of the first things I do is I like looking at the targets from last week and then trying to compare that to what we've seen previous to see if we can put together some quality intel. And what we've seen, I'm going to keep this with the Falcons. What we've seen is that Mooney and London had 3 targets week 1, both had 7 week 3, both had 9 and 8 week 2, week 3. Yeah, both had 9 for London, 8 for Mooney week 3, 7 and 7 week 2. What am I getting at here, Luch? At some point, a huge Darnell Mooney game is coming. And it might be both of them together. Why am I bringing this up? Mooney is being treated like a true number 2 receiver in this offense. Like when he was in Chicago with DJ Moore got all of the quality stuff, and then they just sent Mooney on these weird fly routes all the time and just didn't get him the ball in quality, quality targets. Mooney's getting quality targets in Atlanta. And so the same way Juwan Jennings popped off in the San Francisco offense, situation's different. I get it. But my point is, Mooney's a true number 2 in his offense. And Kirk Cousins seems to want to get him the ball when he's open. I'm saying Mooney could be sneaky for GPPs going forward. And I'm not saying we got to play him every week. But we know, Luch, one of these games, he's going for 120 and 2 on like 3 catches, right? Like at some point, this is coming. And I want to put the listeners on this right now. Like, look out for Darnell Mooney. I think big things are on the horizon if this keeps up.
You're absolutely right. And last year, he had just a 68% cashable target share from the Bears and Justin Fields. Which among receivers last year who ran at least 50 routes, that ranks outside the top 220 in terms of cashable target shares in the NFL. So you make a fantastic point about quality targets. And I remember watching just from the naked eye last year, just missed a few bombs from Fields here or there that would have gave him another 150, 200 yards plus on his resume probably from last campaign. So it seemed like he was always running free in that secondary. Ironically, I know Cousins missed him against the Eagles wide open on one a couple weeks ago as well. But Darnell Mooney kind of underappreciated probably just from looking at box scores and highlights. But
he's still getting fantasy production. Like week 2, he had 17 fantasy points. Week 3 had 14.6. Now, I'm not saying that's anything to write home about. What I'm saying is this. He's 4,400 this week. Like, he's not breaking the bank. He's one of these under-the-radar guys that could get there. So I'm just saying he's a sneaky target for me going forward. I love that.
I mean, some may say it's his production is unsustainable for his standard, but when you look at last year's data, like you said, and the role he's in, he's getting some accurate passes now. Different role, different quarterback, and I feel like the Falcons are carrying this poor stigma for the whole Michael Penix thing. But we talked about Atlanta a couple weeks ago. Went out, got Justin Simmons, made some really critical moves. Darnell Mooney might be the best move that they've made, honestly, per dollar. In terms of bringing someone in and what the value's been, he's been fantastic. Couldn't agree more.
For sure.
Well, two games I definitely want to talk about in the review segment here is Philly and New Orleans, and also the Minnesota game in Houston, because I have some pretty good notes for both of them. But I was wrong. I love producer Steve. Kind of wish TJ was producing the show so I can hear what he had to say about the New Orleans Saints. But credit given where it's due, because the Eagles showed up, and these Saints looked like the Saints from before the Kubiak era. That's exactly what it looked like. It was gross. But I'm tipping my cap to Vic Fangio, because there was a big part of me who wasn't impressed with Vic Fangio and his recent stops. I think he's been stubborn in the past and maybe unwilling to adjust at times. And people, I mean, I don't know how often you've been in the Northeast, but for anybody listening, Philly sports talk radio is borderline unbearable, especially when things are bad. And I'm guaranteeing you there's not a lot of people that are thrilled after yesterday's game, even though they won. But you got to tip your cap to Vic Fangio. Yes, it helps that Jordan Davis up front with Jalen Carter played like the first round picks that they were finally. And Fangio was getting a lot of crap last week, especially in that last drive against Atlanta, for not bringing any pressure or anything. And he totally did a 180 with the schematics from what the Eagles were running last year. They were one of the highest in terms of how much they played man coverage teams in the league, played a lot of single high. And this year he's bringing in a lot of zone and a lot of those principles. So a total 180 in terms of schematics from what the Eagles were running. I will say this, Derek Carr, I almost said David Carr, name drop. Derek Carr had 27 dropbacks on Sunday. Philadelphia, I believe, played man coverage on 7 or 8 of those dropbacks, allowed 0 fantasy points per dropback on those plays to Derek Carr. They played zone on 70%, which I said, Vic's playing a lot of zone this year. That's fine. But something they were not doing is that the Eagles played the third highest 2 high safety looks on Sunday, according to fantasy points data, at 59%. And they played 37% cover 4, which really is, both numbers are much higher than they were the first 2 weeks of the season when things weren't as great for Philly. I mean, I think to the Green Bay game, I know the field was bad, different country you're playing in, things weren't very good. Atlanta, scored 24, 25 plus against them, whatever it was 2 weeks ago. But they played 2-man high on just 36% of the dropbacks in the first 2 weeks. So they played almost 25% more 2 high looks. And maybe Vic and the analytics department in Philly got to him, or maybe he was involved with the process. I don't know what the closed door conversations were, but look around, look what the league's doing. Parity wins sometimes. The league that's all we're hearing about the last 3 weeks. The 2 high safeties, send guys back. And I tell you what, Quinyon Mitchell was amazing in that game too. Like, totally took away Shaheed, who was an X factor in the first couple of games. So I'm giving credit to Vic Fangio specifically and this Eagles defense for adjusting, playing more of this 2 high look that's given the entire league fits. And as much as the offense kind of made you want to puke, and tip of the cap to the Saints defense as well. Saquon Barkley made one fantastic bounce and housed a beautiful run. That was just him going with the bounce, using his vision, making a big play. That's why they spent the money and brought him in. Because newsflash, DeAndre Swift's doing nothing in Chicago. And I really thought
that's also why they won the football game.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
so
why do you go
to Vic Fangio and Barkley? The Eagles made adjustments and really stifled New Orleans at home. Huge win, which gives them the luxury to maybe think about sitting AJ Brown one more week now if they want to. Chief, go ahead. Talk to me about this game.
Yeah, and I mean, look, man, I mean, that's why you go and, they say for whatever people want to say about, not paying running backs or paying running backs. To me, it's about what is that running back going to do to help you close the gap, close the deal, right? And so what was Saquon Barkley able to help them do yesterday? That big run, and also going for 2 and getting it loose, that helps them seal the deal yesterday in a low-scoring game where Jalen Hurts lit the world on fire via the passing game. Yeah, he still threw an interception, but he lit the world up on fire with the passing game. They only scored 15 points, but what were they able to secure? The W. And that's what this league is about. You got to keep stacking wins any way you can get them. And the more you do that, Luce, the better position you're going to be in come playoff run season, right? We can start getting in November where teams start looking at the schedule saying, hey, How far are we out? How many more? Like, that stuff matters. So I'm with you. Kudos to the Eagles. You know, I obviously I felt like the Saints are still going to be fine. And here's why I think the Saints are still going to be fine. I mean, we play in one of the weakest divisions in football. Not we, but the Saints. One of the weakest divisions in football. So, you know, I think I don't think anything's going to change too much in terms of, you know, where they're going to be long term. So I
agree. I expect them to be.
I think they'll be fine.
Contending in December, January for playoff implications. And that game was anyone's game, fourth quarter. And man, we talk a lot of Jalen Hurts and Eagles on this show, but the freaking decision making just keeps popping up. I mean, red zone interception, he lost a fumble. Listen, it's good to see him being a decisive runner. And I know they're limited right now without A.J. Brown. And then, of course, you lose Devontae Smith for a period of time. But, I mean, no lack of weapons made him throw that red zone interception, right? Still having some ball security issues in the pocket as well. It's the same thing. A big win for the Eagles. Like I said, ton of credit to the defense and to the Saints for fighting hard. That was just a battle of a game. And you get those sometimes. And if they square up again later in the year, there's going to be adjustments from both sides too. But come on, Jalen. I speak for probably the Eagles fans that are tuning in. I don't even want to know the 4-letter words you were saying when he threw that red zone interception, because trust me, I thought the same.
Well, listen, that wasn't the worst one. Anthony Richardson probably threw the worst red zone interception yesterday, for what it's worth. But we've already talked about that game. I've got one more situation I want to talk about, and this is something that we talked about, I think, a couple weeks ago, and I have mentioned it, but I want to reinforce our ideas here, that I don't think there's any way Justin Fields does not keep the Steelers' job after the performance this past week. First of all, they keep winning, and he doesn't have to score 30 points a game to get it done, Luch. Be productive, take care of the football, right? Let the defense get rolling, and he should keep his job. And so, for a guy that pretty much got run out of Chicago, it looks like he may have found a home with the Steelers if he can keep being productive. And I think at this point it's his job to lose. I feel like he's won the starting job. And guess what? I actually think Russell Wilson would have been fine starting. But as luck would have it, he's out early with injury. Justin Fields has to come in and shoulder the load. And I think we've seen, at least this season, he's progressively gotten better with the offense each week, right? Incrementally. And so, if he can continue to progress and get better, and once again, he doesn't have to throw for 250 a game. I think if he's anywhere between 190 and 220 with good efficiency, the Steelers should be fine. And right now they're leading the division, and they've got one of the best defenses in football. So, I mean, I like what we're seeing there, and I think that's an interesting division as we get down closer to the end of the season, because the Bengals have got to get up off the mat, right? Baltimore is now trailing, and the Browns just lost again. So, they've got to get up off the mat. So if they can hold their position, we talk about it being early in the season, but the more wins they keep stacking up consecutively, Luch, the better they're going to be as they get down to the end of this thing. So it's interesting for me to see how the Steelers are going to contend in a what we feel like should be a tough AFC North down the stretch.
We talked about either the offseason podcast we did or the end of last year, and we talked a lot about the Vikings and why are they always so competitive every year, no matter who they have. They share another common denominator as the Eagles, at least as of last year. They share another common denominator, maybe with the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. But over the years, the Vikings built from the inside and invested in a ton of draft capital in the offensive line. And I forget who the big free agent signing they had a couple years ago who stuck on the line. I don't have it in front of me. Philly, obviously, that team was built on offensive line with Jason Kelsey and the whole nine, and Lane Johnson got banged up yesterday, so hopefully he's all right. But the Eagles win these kinds of gritty games because they're often at least holding their own in the trenches at worst. And look how bad the Bears' offensive line is right now. Now, you have to feel for what Justin Fields was working with last year, because the narrative of Caleb Williams is kind of switching up a little bit. Some people are hopping off the train already. I mean, it's obviously ridiculous to give up on the kid after 3 games, but that offensive line is atrocious, and that carried over. Pittsburgh, I can't say that their line is good, but they've at least invested draft capital the last couple seasons. Broderick Jones, etc. Fatanu got hurt yesterday, unfortunately. Another young prospect they took in the first round of this draft. Hopefully he comes back this year. I don't know the severity of that injury. But these teams that are somehow always competitive invest in the offensive line. And here we go with Minnesota and Sam Darnold, right?
Yeah.
It's good football. And let's jump to that game, if you will. Let's see if you have anything to add in there real quick.
Listen, man, I've gone on record talking about how good of a offensive coach and quarterback mentor that Coach O'Connell is. Like, I've gone on record talking about how good I felt like he's been. And here's why, Lucian. I've mentioned this several times, but I just want to reinforce our point here. As quarterbacks have come and go in the Coach McConnell system, and I talked about it, and this is where he kind of, to me, demonstrated some of his brilliance last year. Kirk Cousins goes down. This season is supposed to be over, and they still somehow find ways to be right in the thick of it at the end, when they had probably one of the biggest quarterback carousels there was last season, right? I mean, I think last season they ended up starting, 5 different quarterbacks? I think it was either 4 or 5. But Coach O'Connell seems to be able to put quarterbacks in a position to be successful. And I think that's really important for a coach to be able to do, Luke. Like, right? Find ways to help your team be successful. And Sam Darnold is looking just like Kirk Cousins. Now, hey, Houston helped them out, gave them massive short fields yesterday, so he didn't have to do much. But guess what? They did the same thing in the Giants game. What are they playing, Luch? Complementary football. You've got Coach O'Connell, who's doing his thing. You've got Coach Flores doing his thing on the defensive side. They're playing complementary football, and it's working. Now, here's the thing. I don't think they're going undefeated. At some point, they're going to be in a dogfight, right? Every team's going to be in a dogfight, which is why I'm not worried about the Saints just yet. It's just, week 3. But my larger point is, this seems to be a good football team. And, me included, I think we all felt like the Lions were the team to beat, and the Vikings are saying, hold my beer. I've got a little something to say about that. And, they're showing up week in and week out.
I was holding a lot of beers yesterday after watching Will Levis. And speaking of bad offensive line play, J.C. Latham looks pretty good. Even the legend Bill Callahan hasn't fixed the right side of that line. And maybe Will Levis is bad. I don't know. I just can't fathom. He had 2 terrible plays, and the Titans could very well be 2-1 right now. I think they lose the Green Bay game either way yesterday, though. And the thing is, they're like I said, there's Titans fans calling for Mason Rudolph. You're 0-3. Well, what's Mason Rudolph going to do? He's not your long-term answer. It's going to be an ugly long season, and hopefully Will Levis shows you something. It's not. If not, then you're looking at mock drafts for next year. But it's just so hard to gauge someone, and I know Will Levis has made some atrocious decisions with just awful line play. And the Titans didn't have the TV time that the Bears have had, but you saw Caleb Williams running for his life in every game. You saw Justin Fields last year behind a bad offensive line running for his life every game. And, Houston, that brings me to Houston. And I'm not panicking about Houston. And they got whopped yesterday.
And let me say one more thing. We're going to continue to talk about Houston. I'm plugging this in. We don't have to talk about it. Kudos to Matt LaFleur.
Yes.
Also getting his team to win football games after the Aaron Rodgers era. Just want to shout that out, because we expect them to be really good with Jordan Love. And we said, oh my goodness, Malik Willis is coming in. Their season's over. I didn't say that, but I'm saying, like, the general sentiment was now they're behind the 8 ball, and Malik Willis has come in and won some football games. Like that.
He looked like 2004 Madden Michael Vick out there yesterday.
Yeah, he's come in and won some football games, and that's what you need.
Green Bay, that front seven is good. Maybe even the most underrated front. As bad as the Titans are up front right now, take nothing away from the tenacity that Packers, at least front four, has. I mean, man, they are super good, and a huge win for Green Bay at this point in the season, giving Jordan Love another week to get back and get healthy, and a great game plan, both sides of football, like Green Bay called as well. But my one comment on that game about Will Levis and why I think, and there has to be some accountability here between him and maybe Brian Callahan, is every single play, the play clock, he's snapping it at 0. Every single play. So I don't know where the communication problem is here. I had a comment on my post I made, and some guy said, well, Aaron Rodgers does it, so it must be good. The big difference here between Will Levis and Aaron Rodgers is everything. But seriously, though, with Aaron Rodgers, he's been doing this a long time at the pro level. He understands the protection, A. B, his protection is better. And C, he processes these defenses much better and quicker than Will Levis does. So Aaron Rodgers can afford to run that play clock down because he's not Will Levis and doesn't have Will Levis's protection. Nobody can help the Titans, Steve. So that's for sure. Anyway, the Vikings and Houston, Chief. We have to move on here for time purposes, but the interior offensive line had a poor showing for C.J. Stroud. It just shows you how human these guys can look when the protection is awful. And it starts in Pee Wee football. It's the biggest thing that transitions over whether you're 8 years old or you're 35 years old, played in the league for 15 years. Offensive line play. C.J. Stroud was pressured on 44% of his dropbacks yesterday and was sacked 4 times against Minnesota. Can't do anything. So I'm sure he felt really good, giving some love to Caleb Williams after last week's game, who was running for his life. And now he got a big taste of it because Brian Flores is a freaking maniac defensively, which is awesome. And Minnesota did 2 things that caught my attention via fantasy points data here. They ran cover 0 on 19% dropbacks last year against Houston, which was 10% more than their season average. So that's a big number for cover 0. Look out, here comes the pressure. And on the flip side, though, as much cover 0 as they were running, according to fantasy points data, they ran the second most too high safety cover looks yesterday as well, which is telling me that he was really mixing things up if those 2 things are true. So took advantage of that bad interior line. They just have some dogs up front too. Minnesota does. And no Joe Mixon, but there's no run game going regardless. And it just goes to show you that, obviously offensive line is a big deal, but it's also really stinking hard to win in this league when you're forced to be one-dimensional. And they were yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, speaking of the Vikings, that's with Daniil Hunter gone, right? Like they don't have
who he plays for, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Plays for the Texans. But so I want to bring that up because Daniil Hunter was a big part of their defense. A staple pass rusher, and he's out the door. But here's my thing here's why I want to give Minnesota so much credit. And I talked about it in our previous time where I was talking about complementary football. If Minnesota wins this game, 23-17, so on some late heroics, then I think we view it differently. Luch, this is a dominant performance. It was 34-7, and why did they keep having short fields? Brian Flores really caused some serious problems for Stroud on yesterday, right? And so, you look at this Vikings team and you say, well, is this something that can continue? Well, Luch, they're not going to put up 34 points every game, but if the defense can play lights out, they're going to have a chance to continue to win football games through complementary football because, once again, it seems as if they will be able to score points. Can the defense continue to get stops? They got to stay healthy, right? They can't have injuries at the wrong spot. It's all going to have to come together for them. But, I mean, at this point in time, it looks like the Minnesota Vikings are definitely, I'm going to call them a top 5 team in the NFL. Maybe even top 3 this week, but definitely top 5 as constructed right now.
What if I told you on the DK main slate, the highest projected total right now is 47.5? A lot of ugly games, a lot of divisional rivalry games. It's going to be a fun week, but that game featured your Carolina Panthers. So the Bengals-Panthers total right now is 47.5. Looks like Bengals are currently, 6.5 point favorites.
We're going to get some R.
Short
Red
week
Rocket
for the Bengals.
Revenge. Red Rocket Revenge is what we're going to get this week. Come on through, Andy. Let's see if we can pull out another win. Listen, as bad as I thought this season was going to be, Luch, and I mean, listen, I thought our organization was going up in flames. If we end this next week 2-2, if Andy Dalton somehow finds a way to stick it to the Bengals, I'm going to be feeling much better about our outlook this year. Much better, Luke. 2-2 sounds a lot better than 1-3 or 0-4, which is where we were headed if Bryce Young stayed at the helm. I couldn't be happier. Anyway, I'm going to keep my fandom to myself. Let's move along.
Saints-Falcons, interesting game. Colts-Steelers, another good one.
Saints-Falcons, this is where, so remember I said I feel like the Falcons will be fine. I mean, the Saints will be fine. I do feel like the Saints will be fine. If they win this game, Luch, it's as if they didn't lose to the Eagles. Why? It's a division game. And if you keep winning division games, Luch, you keep stacking those up. And once again, at the end of the year, you're sitting pretty. I do think the Saints win this game on Sunday, for what it's worth.
I lied. I missed the Cardinals-Commanders game in the 4:00 window, 49.5 point total. Waiting for my Marvin Harrison lines to open up. He was way too low, barely didn't cover by a lot last week, but he did cover. So
he got enough volume to cover, which is what we talked about, Luch, right? Like there. So for me, and I know we're data guys, but there's still a common sense component to certain things. And one of those things is this, Luch. Remember, like after week 1, his ownership was basically non-existent week 2, right? They did not draft this man as a top 10 pick to not throw him the football. You get what I'm saying? Now in week 2, they pretty much just kind of lit the scoreboard on fire and ran away with it. But you go to week 3 and you look at the Cardinals. What did you see here, Luch? You got 11 targets in that game. Like, this is what he's going to be in this offense long term. We're not saying he's getting 11 every game. Some games he may get 15. The next game he may get 7 or 8. But he was drafted to be their number 1 guy. And like you said, I do feel like his line was a little soft. I think I got it at 60.5. I think it was by the time it closed. And obviously he cleared that barely. But if he keeps getting the volume, those are numbers he can eclipse week in and week out, as long as he's catching the football enough. So I'm with you, definitely like that. And I mean, he should have another monster game coming up, but I think the field is probably going to be on him this week at home against Washington.
Yes, 7,500 price tag for Marvin. I have no problems playing pretty much anybody in that game. Really interested to see how the Commanders fight against the Bengals on Monday night. Obviously, it just feels like a game you want to run a bring back with, but Washington has proven to have been such a low volume offense. I don't think you have to force a bring back if you're stacking the Cardinals next week. Looking at quarterback, Jalen Hurts against Tampa Bay. A lot of injury news has to shake out for us to figure out what we want to do with Philly. It's only Monday. CJ Stroud also in a divisional game against Jacksonville. Joe Burrow again.
One of those teams that hasn't won a game, and they're playing the Bills tonight.
Short week. Very short week.
Could very well be 0-3 by the time this thing closes out.
Yep. Yeah, I think Kyler seems like he's going to garner probably the most ownership if I had to guess on Monday afternoon right now. You have to wonder when your guy Justin Fields is going to break a slate eventually. Eventually, he's going to have a big run. I mean, Arthur Smith is just protecting this guy, and he's been doing a pretty good job of it. Eventually, he's going to have like a 50-yard touchdown. interesting game. You mentioned Anthony Richardson, and he threw one of the worst red zone interceptions I've ever seen as well. But Will Levis rightfully getting a lot of crap, but his counterpart in the AFC South there, who everyone assumed would be much better than he is, also has thrown 6 interceptions so far this season. I'm really tempted to hit Pittsburgh money line, even though they're going to Lucas Oil. If Fields can keep taking care of the ball, I mean, you kind of like them if you can get him even at like minus 120 or something right now. Anyway, I know we're talking DFS pricing, but go ahead, Chief. What are you thinking about here at quarterback?
I mean, clearly I think Kyler is one of the better plays this week. I definitely think, people are going to be interested. He's 6,800. He's still not even at the top of the totem pole. So I like him a ton. I think at some point, like, when is Jaden Daniels going to have another week 1 performance? And I'm saying that because he's on the other side of that game. Like, clearly we understand his fantasy value is wrapped up in this. Can he throw for 180 to 200, Luch, and maybe 1 touchdown, and then pick up another 50 or 60 on the ground and get another? Like, that's where his fantasy production is. I feel like it's going to be locked into this season. And in a game where they should be behind, I wish he was a little cheaper, but I think he's a really good tournament play this week on the other side of that game. The problem is, who are you going to pair him with? It may not be anyone. Like, the proper pairing may be Daniels, James Conner, and Marvin Harrison, right? Like, that might actually be the proper way to play Jaden Daniels in this particular slate. So I wanted to mention him on the other side because I do like him quite a bit. And then, you've got another interesting spot here with Matthew Stafford going against a good defense, but now he's 5,600. And it's ugly, right? Like, they're going into Chicago, but is he just cheap enough to get it done? Like, that's a decision I'll make a little bit closer to the end of the week, Luch. But, just kind of looking at cheap quarterbacks, like, he's one. And then, Kirk Cousins is cheap. Derek Carr is still cheap. And then Brock Purdy, his price basically didn't move. And, they're at home against New England. And if Debo and Kittle don't come back, then we're kind of in the same situations last week where you're looking at him, you're looking at Mason, you're looking at Jennings, and you're looking at Ayuk all over again with kind of a condensed production pool. So those are just some thoughts I have early in the week. And then, obviously, as I get closer to the Blitz show where we talk, stuff a little bit more from the Blitz projection system, I'll have a few more thoughts. But just us pulling up the slate and looking at it, both quarterbacks in that Washington-Arizona game intrigue me. And then, Matthew Stafford's price because of the production is just kind of dropped. And I don't know. That's really cheap for a guy that we know could still put up 250 and 2 at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I think Trevor Lawrence is also interesting, and he still has that rushing upside. I know things haven't been great, but they haven't really had an opportunity in terms of plays per game. They haven't really ran a lot of offensive plays the first couple of weeks of the year. Obviously, they're on a short week as well. And we mentioned the Bengals and the Panthers. I know you didn't want to say Andy Dalton, but 5,300, I have no problem pairing him with Deontay Johnson again, especially if the field doesn't want to go back to them. First couple of weeks, we saw that the Panthers' offensive line, their pass blocking graded out really well, which made you feel even worse about Bryce Young. So if they can keep Andy Dalton upright, short week, Cincinnati, I think it just seems kind of like a gross game, but the total's pretty high, and I don't hate that at all. I think something else interesting, I know we're hopping around real quick, and we need to sooner than later get going, but Todd Bowles came out and said today that Bucky Irving's going to get more touches moving forward. So I really am curious how the public is going to react to that news, especially if Rachaad White is healthy and plays. I know White was questionable like all week, and he ended up playing, but he's been bad. And there were a lot of like anti-Rachaad White I don't know, what do you call them? Not truthers, not haters, but people that weren't sold on. I mean, maybe he's really not a good runner. He just got a ton of volume last year. He was not coming off the field, and quietly, Bucky Irving has looked pretty good. I know one of the games was kind of mop up time, but they spent draft capital on this kid for a reason. So, if no one's going to play Bucky Irving, I might have some interest for large field GPPs. I just wanted to bring that up because I read that before we hopped on the air.
Absolutely.
As well. And just spitballing here. I mean, we talked about the volume in Kyron Williams. Another rough matchup against Chicago is pretty good against the run, but worked out, if you're the volume guy, worked out against San Francisco for Kyron, and he's not even close to 8K on DraftKings. You mentioned James Conner, great price against the Commanders. I think that's a good bounce back spot for sure. Just scrolling here.
Yeah, this week doesn't look like the best week on paper, but I still think there's enough interesting spots for us to attack. We just got to hope this Commanders-Cardinals game doesn't get out of control in terms of the Cardinals ownership, which, looking at the slate, like, just, eyes wide open here, it looks like that game, the Cardinals ownership could get out of hand early.
I'm real curious about the Eagles in Tampa Bay, and so many variables on the Philly side. And maybe Philly will hit a bit of regression. Maybe they won't play as well as they did against New Orleans. I don't know. But Chris Godwin's already scored more touchdowns than he did last year. Don't get me wrong. Eventually, the Mike Evans game is coming. But Chris Godwin, he might be the number one fantasy receiver right now, I think, without looking. So, off the top of my head, pieces of that game sound interesting. Of course, we need a lot of clarity with what's going on with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown throughout the week.
Yeah,
also, still love Rome Odunze against the Rams, pending Keenan Allen. I mean, Rome's only 5,200, had almost 50% of the team's air yard share. Just spitballing here, man. Anything else you like that's catching your attention early in the week here?
Well, it is, but it's the late Monday night game with the Seahawks Lions, which, I mean, Seahawks, we talked about them being undefeated. And after this week, and they get the Lions, they got to go into Ford Field, and let's see how that goes. Like, we're going to see if this Seahawks magic is for real, and if so, that means the Lions will now be 2-2, Luch, behind, firmly behind the Minnesota Vikings. So Vikings are undefeated, and that's a big deal for them. Because they also on not on the bye, they get the Packers, which is a divisional game. If they win that one, lose, they're going to be ahead in this division, like ahead by at least a game. So this is very interesting to me in terms of those two games in particular and how we're going to view them in the division standing. I think those are big games.
My last thought for here on a Monday is I think Joe Mixon's status is also going to be huge because I know they had a real massive negative game script against Minnesota, but Cam Akers is not good at football. Dameon Pierce was having a garbage preseason and a garbage summer. They're not going to want to just pound the rock against Jacksonville, so I have no problem. It kind of makes that game a little more appealing in terms of I'll go back to Nico Collins, maybe playing with some Trevor Lawrence and one of the cheap Jacksonville pass catchers. We'll see what happens with Evan Ingram by the time we get to next Sunday as well, because there's some value at tight end for Jacksonville too. Listen, man, I know we got to get going and wrap things up here. So you got any GPP food of the day or any story time for us on tap today?
Yeah, got a little bit of story time. So for those of you that don't know, I coach girls basketball. And one of the things we've been doing to prepare for the season, Luch, is we've been having workouts. And by workouts, I mean, the girls have been lifting weights, running, just doing things to help get their body ready for the long season. Well, one of my players, over the summer, she was having some slight knee issues, and so she'd need to sit out a little bit, and obviously her family took her to the doctor, and it's real interesting to me, Luch. What was happening was she was having trouble with either knee popping out of place, which was, I don't know if anybody's ever had a knee pop out of place. I haven't, but it sounded painful to me. And so as we've been getting her ramped up, we haven't pushed her as much, obviously, because we want to take care of everybody. She's still got some follow-up appointments, so forth and so on. But what I want to talk about, Luch, is her attitude and her willingness to stick with the process, even though she's faced some challenges. And obviously, this is a DFS show, and I want to parallel that to DFS, because sometimes the process is going to be really good. I mean, you might have an extremely good process 2 weeks in a row, and you may not get the results you want. You may experience some pain. But if you keep doing the right things, Luch, you put good in, you're going to get good out. And so that's my story for this week. As hard as many setbacks as she's had, with her knees, she keeps putting in the work to be successful. And she's a good player, by the way, just happens to have that issue, and she's gone to the doctor to get it worked out. But that's my story time for this week. Keep persevering, everyone. Keep fighting, keep putting in the work, and good things are going to happen.
I got to tie in a quick GPP food thought for you. Is next weekend, one of my favorite local events is happening. It's the Celtic Classic here in the Lehigh Valley, and that's in Bethlehem. Obviously, an Irish-based festival, as you can imagine, with all kinds of Celtic music and that whole genre, which I can't say that I throw my Spotify on and listen to bagpipes and that kind of stuff all the time. But man, as you get older, especially, you just appreciate live music, and it's so cool. But they also have like a strongman competition where these guys, massive dudes who are wearing kilts and things like that, are lifting like telephone poles up and just doing ridiculous things. And I often think about how many of these guys were like D3 or D2 athletes and stuff like that. But the Irish food is so interesting, and it's usually pretty hearty and pretty heavy. It feels like a wintertime thing you want to get into sometimes, but it's not something I typically go out of my way for. So whenever
I'm asking this culturally too. Sorry to interrupt you. Irish food, do they cook with like a lot of potatoes and stuff, right? Like I'm just asking.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I love potatoes.
Is Irish.
Potatoes. Yeah, love it. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. So there's one like really good Irish kind of cuisine restaurant down here, beef, stew, that kind of stuff. I can't think of any of the actual dishes off the top of my head, but looking forward to that. Maybe I'll report back, and one of these live, now we do video live for those of you who are just on the audio end. Maybe we'll try some food on stream. I really want to hit that new, totally switching gears here, but I really want to hit that new Chick-fil-A sandwich up that everyone's talking about, the pimento cheese one. It seems pretty controversial, but maybe we can start testing out some food live here and getting those reactions. Producer Steve says it's good. I thought he was going to yell at me to wrap it up and stop talking, which I will. But if Steve says it's good, then there's some merit behind that. So that's about it. Chief, where can the people find you on Twitter, buddy?
Listen, you can find me at Chief Justice 06 on Twitter, X, and you can find me in Chief's Prop Shop in the RotoGrinders Discord. And just reach out anytime, man. I'm happy to help anyone that I can. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. We thank you guys for joining us. We love you guys. And join in on the conversation. We're having a blast.
Definitely. And you can look me up at the J Carlucci. Big shout out to producer Steve. Ton of Monday night football content on RotoGrinders, 2-game slate. If you're playing tonight, make sure you check out the written stuff. There's going to be some video as well. But don't go anywhere because Steve's throwing up a video we need you to check out real quick. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the week.
Don't let the Chads, Brads, and Dads have all the fun this football season with their parlays and their fantasy team. You can have fun too by playing Tix Pick 6, and you'll have a chance to win a trip for 2 to the Eras Tour in Vancouver. And the best part, it's totally free. So here's the deal. Each week, you'll make 6 picks. 2 of them will be about Taylor, like who's going to be in the suite with her that game. The other 4 will be about the Chiefs game, and it's designed to teach you the basics of sports betting. So who will cover the spread? Or will Travis score a touchdown? You earn points for every right answer, and those points turn into entries into the grand prize drawing. You can win up to 13 points a week. Don't know anything about sports betting? Don't worry. I've got you. Each week I break it all down in a preview article so you can make more informed choices. You must be 21 plus and in the US to enter. For more, check out tixpick6.actionnetwork.com.